All right, and welcome to yet another episode of This Week in MMA along with Fight Night Picks. We're back for another great week of MMA. Of course, you had UFC Rancho over the weekend. We covered it yesterday in our episode of Fight Night Picks !Kicks, but this is, of course, an episode of This Week in MMA where we profile the weekend that was, the week that is. We look into some of the bigger tweets and happenings over on Twitter and social media with the Twitter Purge, our favorite segment. You're going to hear from maybe a couple of sponsors, maybe a couple of people who have been drinking the Kool-Aid, drinking the Strikeforce Energy, but we've got a lot to talk about this week. And, of course, UFC Auckland coming up this weekend. So, Matt, without further ado, as we always like to say, let's get into it. Right, Matt, and as always, we're going to start the show off a little bit differently than most because this is a different weekend. Of course, we had UFC Rancho over the weekend in your main event. You had Corey Anderson taking on Jan Blahowicz in the co-main, Diego Sanchez, Michel Pereira. But Matt, this is a weekend where there were a lot of movers and shakers in my hardcore rankings that I had. You can find those at Hardcore Rank MMA. Some changes in my rankings, some changes, of course, with Blahowicz getting the win over Anderson. There were a few other ones. Montana Delarosa moving up a little bit with her win over Mara Romero Bareilles. Ray Borg, I know, and this is something that we're going to get into with the Twitter Purge, but he's ineligible for the flyweight rankings. I threw him in there. But, Matt, the weirdest thing that happened over this weekend and the biggest talking point was not to do with Brock Weaver and Kazula Vargas, which was one of the more egregious illegal strikes I've seen in a while. It was our co-main event with Diego Sanchez and Michel Pereira. Matt, before I get into that, let me just ask you, how was your weekend?
My weekend was good. I worked a little bit, had a good time though, enjoyed myself almost every night of the weekend. It was pretty good. I had a good time. Yourself?
All right, it was good. It was good. Did you happen to, in your travels, get kneed in the head?
No, I did not. Luckily, I did not get kneed in the head, especially not with a knee on the ground. I know that's a very controversial thing to do to somebody, especially in a cage, but no, it didn't happen to me.
All right, that's good. Now, yesterday in Kicks, I went over this one quite a bit. Quite a few people were able to head into the chat, voice their opinions, whether it was Oliver Ursell, who seems to be tuning in every week, and we really appreciate that. Whether it was Brian Jenkins, whether it was Hood TV, there were a lot of people in the chat that we had yesterday, so I want to thank you for that. Now, of course, we're going live on a Monday afternoon, which typically we don't do, but it's Family Day in New Brunswick, Canada here, and we figured we would. So, biggest talking point, the thing that we're going to lead the show off with was the illegal knee or illegal knees. So, the first one, you had Kazula Vargas and Brock Weaver. We get into it quite a bit because Brock Weaver, making his UFC debut, had a little bit of a maybe USADA issue that got cleared up, kind of delayed his debut. And then he took on a guy in Kazula Vargas who's 34 years old, career lightweight. It was one of those fights where you wonder what's going to happen. Brock Weaver's going to have a size advantage in there. And Vargas dominated the fight.
That's the thing. It wasn't a competitive fight up until that knee. And same thing, I know we're going to talk about the co-main event after. It was kind of the same case with both the fights. It wasn't competitive, but the guy who got hit by it, they just kind of reacted very differently. Like Weaver, you can say what you want about him, but he wanted to compete even after he got completely knocked out cold by an illegal knee. And then when you kind of contrast that with Diego Sanchez, who our whole lives were kind of told, like, Diego Sanchez is that blood and guts warrior, one of the last of the Mohicans. Like, he's going to go out on shield every time. And for him to have an open dialogue with the referee during a fight to be like, can I talk to my coach to see if I should take a DQ or not? It was a really weird thing to see. And it kind of reminded me, kind of an obscure reference, but it sort of gets brought up every now and then, when Paulo Filho fought Chael Sonnen the second time, and Chael beat him by decision, but he was ineligible to win the WEC title because Paulo missed weight. It was kind of the same thing. Like, Paulo didn't seem like he was himself at all. He was talking to basically nobody. He was kind of having a breakdown mid-fight. And I kind of compared this, and it might have been a big exaggeration at the time. I really thought that this was going to be MMA's kind of equivalent to No Moss. It seemed to me, at least, because Diego Sanchez, to have such a great reputation as a guy who's going to go out there and he's going to brawl, he's going to give it everything he's got, win, lose, or draw. For him to go to the ref and say, I can't see because there's blood in my eye, when the doctor just wiped blood off his forehead and there was none in his eye. And maybe I would do the same thing if I was him. Of course, you don't want to keep on getting your butt kicked if it's been going like that for about 12 minutes. It was just kind of the last fighter that you would expect to do something like that in the cage.
And it was kind of awkward, too, because you had that where he's clearing the blood off the hairline, and then he said, I basically can't continue to compete because the strike was illegal, just due to the fact that it was illegal. And listen, I see the world in black and white, and I understand what he's trying to do there. But it was weird. It was just really weird. And it's a shame because Diego Sanchez was a hometown guy in that fight, and then everybody roasted him on social media. Now, for people on social media to say, start calling him names, this and that, you realize that this guy is a UFC Hall of Famer. He's been in some absolute wars, especially that Clay Guida fight. He's competed in 4 different weight classes in the UFC. Only 2 guys have done that before. I mean, he's a stud. And for everybody to just throw that out the window and take this one moment in time where he was absolutely losing that fight. I had it typed out on YouTube that Michel Pereira en route to a decision win, back in the win column, whatever. And then for this to happen, it's just a shame. And it's also a shame because Diego Sanchez, and I've said it before, he's 3-1 in his last 4.
Wild.
And his only loss is to Michael Chiesa. And we saw how good Chiesa's looked against, Rafael dos Anjos in his last fight. Right now. Exactly. For Diego Sanchez to be on this kind of run, and realistically he would be obviously 2-2 if he had lost this fight on a 2-fight losing streak. It's just so weird to have his career wrapped up into this point. And then a lot of people focusing, of course, on the fact that he has this mentalist as a coach who, and we'll get into it in the Twitter purge, said some weird things in this fight. And for Trevor Whitman mid-fight to say how weird this is, Trevor Whitman's one of the most polite guys that would never call anybody out. But he definitely did in that fight.
And this is the thing, Trevor Whitman, and that's what I thought that was so insane about it. Because usually Trevor Whitman's like, oh, I really like their corner advice, and he's really positive. But for him to just completely go, yeah, I've known Diego for a long time. Like, this isn't him. I don't know why he's with this coach. He should train with Jackson Wink this whole time. Like, I don't understand what's going on. This is very out of character for him, and you really hate to see it. It's really odd to see a guy who, and it at least sounds like, who really cares about Diego in the middle of a fight, just say, like, oh, this is probably the worst idea he's ever had by training with this guy. And I know we have a video to pull up later, but to have one corner man and try to be in the co-main event, like, you're a real martial artist. You've been doing this for 20 years. You would think he would know how to develop the best team around him. And for him to pick this one, whatever he is, to kind of represent him and be his coach, it was really odd, especially going from a super camp like Jackson Wink to then just go into sort of this independent guy. It was a really weird transition. Hopefully Diego gets the help he needs. That's kind of what I was going to transition into. Like, you wanted to bring up the fact that, it's really bad that there's people on Twitter and whatnot who are taking all this time to call him out when they kind of forget all the things that he has done. That's the thing. That was the old Diego Sanchez who did all those things. And I feel like at this point in his career, we really do need to have a discussion about when we can and cannot tell a fighter when to stop.
And it's one of those ones where in this fight, so they mentioned on the broadcast when he's making the walk, he was peacocking or roostering on his way into the cage, and he did the Mick Jagger moves. Yeah. I did the moves yesterday. But the point being, they mentioned the fact that this was the first time that a 6-year-old daughter had ever seen him live in a fight.
I didn't. Yeah.
Which was interesting because maybe that set him up for his last fight of his career. Now he gets another win. Does he continue to fight? And there's going to be a lot of parallels drawn, and you can really compare him to. It's tough. It's a stretch. He's won 3 of his last 4. BJ Penn lost 7 in a row?
Yeah.
But it's that conversation that we're having again. When do you got to give it up? Now, Diego Sanchez definitely isn't in that extreme of a BJ Penn. He's not getting beat up in parking lots. He hasn't had an incredible DUI of late. It's just a shame that we're talking about legends of the sport in this light.
That's what I mean. And you see some fighters who can make that transition. For instance, a lot of people are giving Bisping credit for how good he was at the desk, like up top, and how good Daniel Cormier was doing the collar. And there are some fighters who do have that transition. They're really good at speaking. They're funny. So the UFC can kind of set them up after they retire from fighting so that they're still kind of in the company. They just do a different thing. And with Diego Sanchez, it's unfortunate because, and I'm not calling him out or anything, he doesn't really have the personality or really just the talking skills to have a job like that. So hopefully he can sort of set himself up to do something after fighting, and we don't need to see him fight until he is 45, just taking all this damage and hanging out with this weird dude who he is. So it was a really unfortunate scene, and it sucks too that that's one of the bigger speaking points from this event. We're in the main event, we probably did just set up our next title fight, and the fact that Diego Sanchez took an illegal knee and then quit is kind of the big speaking point.
So, let us know in the chat what you're thinking about this one. It was really weird and unfortunate the way that both the Weaver Vargas and co-main event between Sanchez and Pereira fights, the way that they ended. Typically you don't see that kind of thing, and if I'm not mistaken, it was the first time that there were 2 illegal knee disqualifications on a card. The other thing that I wanted to bring up here, and we'll keep it on this poster, unified rules of MMA. This is one of those ones where a lot of people on social media weren't sure what the ruling was. It didn't matter whether it was the new rules or the old rules. If you have a knee down, you're considered a grounded opponent. Brock Weaver was sitting basically up against the cage. He was a downed opponent. And then Diego Sanchez had a knee down. I know a lot of people the system where you can put your hands down. I brought the example up yesterday of Chris Weidman when he fought Gegard Mousasi. That was a little chintzy.
He tried to play it.
Yeah, I mean, when you've got a guy in Diego Sanchez that has a knee down and he wasn't trying to game it at that point, that's an illegal strike. And we talked about it earlier. Referee Jason Herzog is not to blame. The promotion's not to blame. Jason Herzog handled that situation better than anybody would have because, like we said, Diego Sanchez, it's a hometown fight. You heard the pop for Sanchez versus Michel Pereira, who was trying to, upstage Israel Adesanya in his walkout. I mean, he had a nice coordinated dance routine, and the people weren't having it. But Jason Herzog really controlled the situation well. Disavowed or disallowed Michel Pereira from going towards his corner and seeking some advice. Same thing with Sanchez, didn't let him really consult with his team and put the onus on his shoulders, being Sanchez's shoulders, as to whether or not he wanted to continue to compete. So it was a very interesting sequence. What did you make of I know what you're going to say, because unified rules of MMA should be unified. And we're not really going to get into maybe suggestions. If you want to throw them down in the comments, please do. But what did you make of just the whole situation, how it was handled?
So if I'm the UFC, I put my foot down at this point and I say we don't come to your state unless you adopt the unified rules. I know that's kind of a controversial thing to say, but when you really think, the UFC could just go to California and Nevada for every single event and they're still going to sell out every arena. And it's almost like those two states have the unified rules. If I'm them, I say, listen, if you want us to come, we're going to bring a lot of revenue to your state, but you have to adopt the unified rules. Just so as a fighter, you don't have to worry about, okay, where I am is going to depend on what rules I have to follow. And the only recommendation I could make is I think that we do need to look at knees to a grounded opponent, kind of like we see strikes to the back of the head. I forget who I saw tweeted out. I forget who it was. I'll give you credit on Twitter later. But it was basically, we need to look at it the same way. You know, sometimes when you're finishing a fight or when someone's finishing a fight, they might land a strike to the back of the head just in the transition. But everyone, it's fair play just due to the fact that there is a lot of movement on the ground. And the Pereira fight, it was kind of the same thing. And the Weaver, it was one of the most outrageous illegal knees. He was sitting down, got kneed in the head. With Sanchez, he had got kneed, was going down, and got kneed again. And although it is illegal, I would like to see kind of a more modified rule set to the fact that I don't think we should allow soccer kicks. I don't think knees to the ground opponent should be allowed. But if you are on your way down from a knockdown and you get hit with a knee, I don't think it is the most outrageous foul. But still one nonetheless. I need to shout out John Dodson real quick. John Dodson I didn't think was going to have a chance to win this weekend. And you can say early stoppage if you want to, but it's really nice to see a guy who a lot of people kind of wrote off and fight one of the biggest prospects, not only in his division, but in the whole sport, kind of make a resurgence and put on a great performance. So really good job by John Dodson.
And I mean, normally what we do here is we'll set up our one topic, we get into the Twitter purge, then we backtrack a little bit, get into a recap, but we get the poster up, so let's get into it right now. We might as well just get into the weekend recap. And overall, the card, I know a lot of people, we put it up here on YouTube, we're thinking like a B or a C. I'd be interested to see what most people are still thinking about the card. To me, it wasn't one of the better cards that we've had recently. No. And based on the fights, they weren't that intriguing or all that great. First fight on the card, Raulian Paiva over Mark Delarosa. It was a great one. It was a great knockout win for Paiva. Now finally he has a win in the UFC. I know he was ranked off of 2 losses. The first one was very close against Kai Kara France. The second one, his eyebrow evaded him. But in that one, he looked great against Mark Delarosa. The Delarosa's going 1-2 on the night. 1-1. The next fight, Macy Chasen taking on Shani Young, who came out firing in the first 2.5 minutes. So a good performance for her in her debut. I mean, what else are you going to do in a week's notice, fighting at, crazy elevation against Chasen. But a good win there. Our third fight of the night at 135, Merab Dvalishvili. Man, if people didn't know his name before or maybe slept on him based on the fact that he was 9-4, his fight against Casey Kenny absolutely just destroyed. I mean, he looked great in this fight.
What did you have it? How did you score it when it was done? I had it 30-25 for Merab. I agreed with that. I know one judge had it going that way. I'm pretty sure Danny Segura tweeted out that that's how he scored as well, but that's how I had it. I thought it was one of the more dominant performances.
I think I had a 30-25. I might have even had 30-24, but I think I had it 30-25, and I could definitely see it that way for Merab Dvalishvili. I mean, this is a guy that wrestle, and even if he gets beat in some of the scrambles, he's just going to continue to keep going. And it was funny the fact that they said that the Sarah Longo team didn't even talk about elevation with Merab Dvalishvili. They just figured, you train at more or less sea level in New York. we're just going to put you up at elevation and see how you make out. And he passed that test with flying
He really
colors.
did. And it brings me back to a quote that Chael Sonnen just did about the Douglas Lima Gegard Mousasi fight, or sorry, the dream fight of if Lima went over and fight Usman. Lima, ever since he lost to McDonald the first time, said, I took cardio out of the equation. I know I get tired, but there's nothing I can do about it, so why worry about it in the first place? And that's by far the best mindset to have. If you're Merab Dvalishvili and you just don't know the difference between, it's basically a placebo. It really is. You just don't know the difference between 5,000 feet above sea level and 0 feet above sea level. If I'm Sarah Longo, I lie to him every single fight going into it. Because if you can look that good not knowing about the elevation factor, then just keep on doing what you're doing.
Come on, Merab! Come on, Merab! Great fight, though. And this is a guy that at 135, yeah, now he's 10-4, but the sky's the limit.
It
I'm
really
serious.
is.
Like, this is one of those
You
guys.
were on the train. I might be the conductor of the Merab Dvalishvili train.
That's not fair. But you know what a fight I want to see, and it's not like tomorrow. Like, you know, it was asked, and Web TV, how's it going out there? Thanks for heading into the chat. It was thrown out there. If I'm not mistaken, Web TV, it might have been you, it might have been Brian, it was somebody that was in the chat yesterday, but Merab Dvalishvili and Jose Aldo, or one of these up-and-coming prospects, Jose Aldo. I wouldn't throw him to the fire just yet.
Aldo knocks him
But here's my idea for Merab Dvalishvili. So now you beat Casey Kenny, who was on a win streak. Yeah, one of the fights maybe didn't beat Ray Borg, but whatever.
So upset.
Okay, have him fight a 20-15 guy next. Then have him fight a 15-10. The fight I want to see, Merab Dvalishvili, Rafael Sunsao, make it happen before Sunsao retires. That's a good fight.
I think it is too. I think the Aldo one might be a terrible fight, just because Aldo's built perfectly.
It's too early.
Well, exactly. Like Aldo, I want the greatest ever, or one of them, to fight Merab Dvalishvili. Like, give him time. He does need to develop. His striking's not good at all. I don't feel. It's just not. He has very frustrating striking, is what he has.
Okay, so if you're going to go calf kick, and then you're going to go like a jab, and out of it you're going to do a spinning back fist, you throw about 15 of them, they're predictable. I played hockey last night, and I threw out 5 or 6 wraparound shots. I missed every single one of them, and the goalie saved every single one of them. You know why I'm saying that? Because it became predictable. You know exactly what I'm going to do. You know exactly what
Merab has good skills on the feet. It's one of those things, and this stuff does take time. He has to put everything together. And like you said, it was a good point. When you keep on doing that one combo that you really like to do, you might be able to get away with it once, twice, 3 times. But when you keep on going to that well over and over and over, if he did fight someone who was a better striker than Casey Kenny, he would have been able to see the openings in that. So it's just something he has to work or watch out for. But when you're as good of a wrestler as he is, every fighter you're ever going to fight is going to have their hands down, just for the fact that they want to defend your takedowns, and that's going to open up his striking a lot more. So he is one of the better prospects at 135. I'd love to see, and again, this is going to be kind of like the young feasting on the young. If he fought Sean O'Malley, I'd kind of love it, just because then we could finally see.
That's who it was. It was Sean O'Malley should fight Jose Aldo. That was the conversation.
Oh, okay, I love that one too. But Dvalishvili and O'Malley, that could be really fun in the future. 135 is one of the better divisions in the UFC. The only problem that I really have is they don't ever, like, the top 10 doesn't seem to be very active in the division. That's the problem. But when they do fight, always put on great performances. One of the better divisions in the UFC.
Next fight, you had Devin Clark taking on Daquan Townsend. We don't have to talk about it a whole lot, but now Daquan Townsend is 0-3 since joining the UFC last summer, had a layoff due to USADA suspension, and then he's had 2 fights in 3 weeks and lost both of them. Devin Clark looked good in this fight. I mean, he fought a Devin Clark style fight where he was able to get the fight to the ground. I was surprised he wasn't able to get the finish, but a good decision win for him, able to get back on the horse. Congrats. The next fight, Scott Holtzman, Jim Miller. I mean, it was a fight of the night. It was a great fight.
Oh, yeah.
Jim Miller, yeah, we both picked him to win. If I'm not mistaken, we had both picked him to win by submission. But it was a good fight by both guys. But man, Scott Holtzman showed that even at 36 years old, at 155, when you've only had, this is your 17th professional fight compared to a guy that's had over 40, most submission attempts ever in UFC history. He was top 5 for average or total fight time. If I'm not mistaken, he's number 1 for lightweight. That was a tough test, and Scott Holtzman passed with flying colors.
Exactly. And I'll be honest, I don't see Scott Holtzman beating a lot of top 15 guys, if any of them, but there's so many fun fights at the 155 division for Scott Holtzman, it's not even funny. I don't want to see him fight a guy like Charles Oliveira or Kevin Lee or, the Paul Felders of the world, but if he could go out and fight, let's say, David Taymor,
Vince Pichel.
There's a lot of fun fights for him at that division, and he's always going to be one of those fighters that you're going to want to watch just due to the excitement value of his fights.
Next one was John Dodson, Nathaniel Wood. We touched on it. I mean, that was the end of Nathaniel Wood's win streak, and now you go back to the drawing board. He had some success there. John Dodson, again, explosiveness, hand speed, and all of a sudden, and again, that knockout power that you never used to see it at 125, rarely at 135, but John Dodson back in the win column, and what a great win and a good performance.
He hit Nathaniel Wood with 2 left hooks backing up, which is crazy hard to do. Like, hit him with a left, right, and then hit him with another left to put him down. And you can say it was an early stoppage. I wouldn't disagree wholeheartedly. I thought it was a little early, but I thought it was just.
I threw it out there in a Twitter group, and Keith Schillen, who's a great follow over at SureDog, and on the Loudmouth MMA Podcast Network, he said if it's on the pendulum of early stoppages, it's right at the start. And I would agree with him there. It was questionable. I mean, I thought that it was early. I thought Nathaniel Wood, he's getting the wherewithal to get back up to his feet, and John Dodson's still hitting him. If he was going to call it, maybe call it after the 3rd or 4th strike, maybe not the 5th or 6th when he's on his way back up. But still, a great win, and it doesn't take away from John Dodson. A good performance.
And Nathaniel Wood's still young. That's the thing. If you lose to John Dodson, it's not like it's the end of his career. Like, you still have, they stopped it early. And he took the loss like a champ, Ash. I don't know if you follow him on social media, but he's like, this isn't that big of a deal to me. Like, he's taking it really well. And that's the thing. When a prospect loses to a veteran 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 100, really, they come back stronger because of it. So, really, the sky's the limit for Nathaniel Wood coming off a loss. I'm really interested to see kind of his evolution moving forward. But John Dodson to be able to kind of reestablish himself. John Dodson for a while has kind of been a boring fighter, for being honest. He doesn't have great power, and he wasn't much of a counter striker. He would just kind of land when you came to him, and then he'd move a lot more. But if he is starting to sit down on his shots again, I'd like to see him maybe fight Cody Garbrandt next. We have 2 guys who have really good boxing, really good power. That could be a fun fight. There's a lot of fights. Again, it's that 135 division. There's so many good matchups moving forward that you really can't go wrong.
Really good boxing in our next fight. Dana Rodriguez, Tim Means. Now, listen.
I need to apologize.
Tweet or comment of the weekend was when we got a nice comment over on YouTube, and I'll find it word for word in a second, but it was more or less along the lines of, listen, you guys said that Dana Rodriguez was a can crusher, and then you picked him. This is the first time I'm watching. This is the last time I'm watching. Good luck, fellas.
I said Tim Means was going to win.
I said that, Dana Rodriguez was a can crusher simply because the last opponent he faced was 15-26. But before that, he'd faced tough competition. He won a good decision on Contender Series. And the way that it works sometimes, we've seen it with Contender Series fighters, you win a tough decision, then you take another fight, and if you win 1 or 2 more, you're on that call list. Well, here's your call up. You're taking on Tim Means, and Dana Rodriguez looked great in that fight. He really did.
Tim Means isn't an easy guy to look good against. I know he has been finished in the past, but he always puts on a good fight, and he's a good measuring stick, I find, for prospects, because Tim Means, of course, no, he's not in the top 25, or he's not in the top 15. He'd be around the top 20, 25 fighters, though, and if you can get a win over a guy like Tim Means, it really sets you up for the future, because there's guys out there like Bilal Muhammad. There's a lot of really good guys who aren't in that top 15, and there's nothing but exciting fights. He fight with Chinte Luque. I think that's a little bit too much for him. But there's so many fun fights. And with his style, too, he's pretty wild. So I don't know if I want to see him fight like a really technical guy next. Like, Jeff Neal is probably Daniel Rodriguez's worst nightmare, for being honest. But there's so many fun fights moving forward that I'm definitely going to watch this next.
Matt, I have 2 off the top of my tongue. And one of them, or tip my tongue, one of them is a good striker. And another guy that, I think of because he fought Gunnar Nelson is Alex Oliveira. If you can set that fight up against a guy like Daniel Rodriguez, that could be a crowd pleaser and a fun one. Nicholas Dalby be a good one too. Now, Matt, we go from our featured prelim to our main card. It was all jumbled up together because it was an ESPN Plus card. Lando Venati, Yancy Medeiros. High expectations going in. What a disappointing fight.
It wasn't great. Lando did what he had to do, but Yancy didn't really show up. I like to use the term live opponent a lot, and some people ask, like I get it on Twitter, they're like, what do you mean by that? Live opponent is you have to fight a guy who wants to win. There's a lot of fights that we see where the guy loses before he goes in there. It's kind of the Mike Tyson effect where people want to say Mike Tyson's the greatest ever. Was he really, though? Because he never won a real fight. Like, every time he'd face adversity, more often than not, he would lose. And in MMA, it's kind of the same thing. There's guys with these great records and they go on these wild win streaks, but they never face any adversity. And it's not that Lando hasn't faced adversity in his career, but in this fight, it's a win. It's definitely not a great win. If he went out there and knocked out Yancy Medeiros, then I can't say this stuff. But if you just kind of grind out a weird decision that doesn't really follow the style of either fighter, it doesn't show me much going forward.
Let's say Lando Venata went out there and put it to Yancy Medeiros. Spinning wheel kick like he did against John McDessie, and then he's in everybody's minds. Now, he wins a decision against a 6-6 Yancy Medeiros. He's 3-4-2 in the UFC. That's how people are going to look at it. You're an average fighter. You had a fun fight against Tony Ferguson. Nobody remembers it. Here you go. So you won on a main card in Rio Rancho. Big whoop. What's next for Yancy Medeiros at 150, or not Yancy Medeiros, Lando Venata at 155? It's not a ranked opponent.
Jared Gordon, maybe? Like, that's the thing. He's going to have to fight a guy near the bottom. Not the bottom of the division, because don't be disrespectful.
Like a 25 to 30
Yeah,
guy.
like we might see Clay Guida versus Lando Venata. We might see Jim Miller, Lando Venata. Scott Holtzman. Again, just bringing up a fight that we saw earlier, but I don't see him fighting in the top 15, not even top 25, honestly, in lightweight. Just, I know we want to hold on to that Tony Ferguson performance, and that's what everyone likes to bring up, but we haven't seen that Lando Venata in a meaningful period of time. The last really impressive performance of his career, I would say, was the loss against Daniel Tamer at UFC 209, and that was a minute ago. And we kind of have to see what he is now. He's a good power puncher. He throws a lot of exciting things, but he doesn't have great cardio. He's not the best wrestler in the world. And there's quite a few holes in his game that he hasn't really been able to shore up. We have to remember, this guy's been in the UFC for almost twice the amount of time that Israel Adesanya's been in the UFC. And for him to come out with such a big burst and then to just sort of falter ever since, it's been kind of disappointing to watch, honestly.
I mean, one of the things that a lot of people want to point out in this fight against Yancy Medeiros was the fact that he was doing the Dominic Cruz shuffle. He was, he had his shoulder low, which was interesting to see, and he was switching stances a lot, but he was on a back foot a lot. And for Dominic Cruz, that works. Like, he can make it work. He can throw wonky kicks and come in with weird strikes, what have you. Now I'm shaking the computer, circling off as well. But for Lando Venata, if you're pressured against a guy that's long, like Yancy Medeiros, that's able to put together combos and not on the back foot as you're moving forward, if that makes any sense, because that's what he did. He'd plant both feet and he'd go 1, 2, and then he continued to move forward. If you have somebody that's putting everything together and pressuring you like that, you're going to have a hard time to win unless you can throw counter strikes, this and that, which we really didn't see from Lando Venata. So it was disappointing to me, really.
It definitely didn't follow the storyline that we had established. We really thought that it was going to come down to either the volume of Yancy or the power of Lando. And that's always a fun narrative when you go into a fight. It always makes for an exciting fight 9 times out of 10. But neither guy really brought their strengths to the fight. So it was just disappointing more than anything.
Then you had the Ray Borg fight against Rogerio Bontorin, which, if I'm not mistaken, I had this, it was either 30-25 or 30-24. It was all Ray Borg in this fight. It was hardly even close, and he dominated the fight. But the storyline is he missed weight.
Yeah, and he's not big at all. Like, you can miss weight if you're huge. I don't like it when fighters miss weight at all, but for instance, when Michael Chiesa missed weight at lightweight, I gave him a bit of a free pass, because he's like 6'9", and he can barely make 170. Ray Borg's not even big if he moves up a weight class. Like, Michael Chiesa at 170 is a big 170, you know what I mean? He doesn't look like a lightweight who moved up. He looks like a welterweight. Ray Borg, if he moves up to 135, and I know he's had fights there in the past, he's like 5'4". He doesn't match up.
He is 5'4".
Yeah, he does not match up well physically with a lot of those guys. You think of the top guys of 135, the Aldos, the Bareilles, the Sterling, the Piotr Jan, the Henry Cejudo. Those are all massive athletes. Even Cejudo, who did make 125, like, he had a hard weight cut. Cole Miller. He's going to have a very hard time at 135. At 125, skill-wise, I don't think he can be a world champion, but I definitely think he's in that top 10 range. As a fighter at 135, though, I don't see it happening. He might be able to get into that top 15 just due to favorable matchmaking because people know who he is, but he's not ever going to win a title.
He owned this fight and definitely surprised me. I thought Bontorin was going to be able to get the win, and yeah, he missed weight, and that's the thing, too. Bontorin fasted from Monday to Friday to make weight, whereas Ray Borg missed weight by 3 pounds. Like, you got to give benefit of the doubt to Bontorin. You got to take something away from Ray Borg. And the real shame is life events and everything that's happened to him over the past 2 or 3 years. It's a shame. Right. It's a damn shame. But a lot of people pointed it out on Twitter, the amount of fights that he had to miss. Of course, the bus incident with Conor McGregor, that played into it. But the weight, the illness with his son, it's a shame. But it's a shame when you miss weight like this. He's ineligible for the flyweight rankings. I said I've ranked him in just based on the quality of the win and the fact that, yeah, it was at 125 the fight, but it just sucks because he is a really good talent. We saw that this weekend.
Michael Chandler tweeted this out a while ago, and I forget what fight he was talking about, but someone had missed weight, and he was like, the weight cut doesn't start the week of the fight. The weight cut starts when you sign the contract. You know, okay, I have to weigh this amount at this time, and you only have to weigh it for like half an hour. Like, it's not like he's walking around at 125 for weeks. He takes all the water out of his body, gets to 125, and then he hydrates, and he'd be big again. And Michael Chandler, who must cut like 20, 25 pounds, he's a huge guy. For him to go out and say that and just question more or less the professionalism of anyone who doesn't make weight, is really unfortunate because that's one of the few things that it's kind of all on you at a certain point. And if you don't care about your own fighting career in that respect, then why should the fans? That's kind of what it is.
Tough go.
Yes.
We talked about Weaver, we talked about Sanchez and Pereira, and we'll get into our main event later on. The one other fight that was on our main card, Montana Delarosa getting the win over Mara Romero Bareilles. She looked great in this fight. We talked about it off air, but there was one position where Mara Romero Bareilles had her all twisted up, and I say twisted because a lot of people in the broadcast included were saying, "Oh, she has an opportunity to go for a twister."
So hard to hit though.
Exactly, but the thing that I noticed was Romero Bareilles, as good of a grappler as she is, she had such a favorable position where she had Delarosa so twisted up. She was on top. She had a free hand where she could have struck and did nothing with the position. I was surprised the referee didn't stand them up because it just stayed in that position for so long, and then Delarosa was able to get out of it and just pour it on. I mean, the thing for me was Delarosa looked great in this position, and it was a shame that we couldn't get anything out of that one position from Romero Bareilles. Back to the drawing board for both of them, but Delarosa continues to climb, and she looks like a really good up-and-coming talent at 125 right
She
now.
does, but I have this problem every time I watch the women's flyweight fight, no matter who it is, and I think, okay, their end goal is Valentina Shevchenko.
Yeah.
You know, like, it's unfortunate, but she's so much better than everyone else in that division right now. We've seen, like, okay, with John Jones, that was the case, but he's starting to decline as the talent's starting to ramp up. So at some point, those two are going to meet. Valentina's so far ahead, and she's still getting better. That's the problem. So as all these other women in the division are getting better, so's your champion. And it's not even close
And
right now.
it's a weird spot, too, because Valentina's already had the two fights against Nunes. One of them wasn't overly close. One of them was razor thin. So she's faced a pound-for-pound great at this point. And she did well. She did well. She did better than most.
It would be like style kind of helps.
It would be like if Ronda Rousey fought Chris Cyborg twice when she was on her rise and lost and then came back and continued. But that never happened. She just kept fighting and winning until finally Amanda Nunes came along or Holly Holm came along and derailed the train. So it's an interesting spot with Valentina Shevchenko because she's already faced that tough competition and she can do it at that level. It'll be interesting to see what happens, but a good win nonetheless for Montana Delarosa. Yeah. Any other parting thoughts with Rio Rancho? We'll talk about the main event later on.
I mean, Jan Blahowicz hits real hard, but I think we knew that going in.
Oh, you said he was pillow-fisted. So, Matt, with it,
Blahowicz?
We'll get into it. We'll get into it. There were comments, but we'll get into it.
I said Corey Anderson was.
We will hear from Strikeforce Energy. Everybody likes to drink it, and you can hear from them. And then we'll get into the Twitter purse. So, Matt, without further ado, let's get into it. Fight Night Picks is brought to you by Strikeforce Energy. Head on over to the website, strikeforceenergy.com. If you enjoy the flavor of freedom, the company's veteran-owned and everything's made in America. They've got great apparel. You can turn any 16.9-ounce beverage into an energy drink. There's no sugar, no calories, no stirring, or no shaking required. They also have a line of different products as well as Strikeforce coffee. So if I head into my cart, I've got a 4-count sample pack. I've got a 20-ounce coffee mug. And if I head into that checkout, use the promo code FNP, click to apply, and you're going to save 20% off any order. That's FNP at strikeforceenergy.com. Today's episode is brought to you by Spretzbox. Head on over to the website, spretzbox.com. All you have to do, click to get started. You can either order one of their boxes that has over $100 in value, or maybe you're interested in a single item, like these great socks. So click on them, add them to your cart. Head on over to the checkout, and then all you have to do is enter in the promo code FNP as follows here. You'll save 10% off your first box or your complete first order. That's Spretzbox.com.
It's time for the Twitter Purge.
All right, it is time for the Twitter Purge, Matt, my favorite segment of the show, and it was a comment that was thrown out there over on YouTube that Jan Blahowicz is pillow-fisted. So I just want to cover that. I just want to cover that, and a lot of people were upset at you for saying Corey Anderson was a pillow-fisted wrestler. Now, we move into the Twitter Purge, my favorite segment of the show, and our first tweet that we're going to bring up is Diego Sanchez's coach, and listen, Borchinia Depot, if you don't follow him on Instagram or Twitter, it's a necessary follow. I want to say 90% of the tweets are Tito Ortizisms, but in this case, we have a video where Diego Sanchez's coach is demonstrating the use of one finger. Now, he has a fighter behind him, and he's going to kind of push him, and the fighter's going to move like most people would when a coach is demonstrating something. But it's just more or less to say that this guy is incredibly unorthodox. And
by unorthodox, Craig's trying to say he's a snake oil salesman. Who, just watch,
It's just weird. I'm not even going to play it, but it's weird. This guy does weird stuff, and he's an odd coach. And for Trevor Whitman to call him out, it really shows you something.
Trevor Whitman too. Like, think of the roster fighters Trevor Whitman has. He has Rose Namajunas and Justin Gaethje, and those are the last two people who are going to quit. And for him to watch Diego Sanchez and kind of call him out during it was sort of a wild thing to see. That's all.
It was weird. All right, so we continue along with the Cub Swanson tweet. I wonder how long it will take for a cornerman to be suspended by a commission for really bad advice or just flat out sucking.
He kind of has a point out there. And coaches shouldn't be
just saying referee Gary Coleman isn't all natty.
I'm calling Gary Coleman out. He's on whatever Arnold Allen's dad's on. But, yeah, it just... They shouldn't let anyone be a cornerman, that's all. Like, Craig and I shouldn't be able to go to a fighter and be like, hey, if you like us enough, can you let us be in your corner? It's just not the right thing. Especially
certainly not right for me.
Especially if, you're not the most qualified person to be speaking about what you're doing. And for him to go, again, from Jackson Wink, say what you want about the gym, whether you like them or not, they're one of the best super gyms in the world. For him to go from them to this guy might be the biggest just drop-off I can think of for MMA training.
All right, well, we'll continue on, but just some weird stuff. And then we get into our co-main event. Diego Sanchez entered the octagon like a rooster and left like a chicken. A quote from Michelle Pajea over on SureDog. You can find the article there. It was weird. It was really weird. And if you're Michelle Pajea, look yourself in the mirror, though, man. I mean, your debut was great against Danny Roberts.
I enjoyed it.
Your second time out against a short notice opponent, Tristan Connolly, you pull your baloney moonsaults and all your crazy tactics, and then you tire. Tristan Connolly wears you out. And then you fight Diego Sanchez in a fight you're winning, and you throw an illegal strike.
In his defense, it was hard to tell by him if it was illegal or not. Like, I think it was
illegal.
But you don't know. If you're in the position, he couldn't see Diego Sanchez's knee on the ground. That's the only problem. I think, he's definitely the one to blame. He's the one who committed the foul. But it's not like he meant to do the illegal knee, put it that way. He didn't know exactly where Diego Sanchez's knee was. And he had him hurt right before that, too. That's why I'm kind of giving him, not a free pass, but there's so many kind of things you can point to and give him a bit of a free pass, for being honest. Because, yeah, he had Sanchez hurt. Sanchez is going down. He hits him with a knee as he's going down. It was illegal, don't get me wrong. It should be no contest disqualification, but it was the most outrageous illegal strike we've ever seen.
Yeah, so now he moves to 23-11 and with 2-0 contests.
Do your backflips, too. Honestly, I don't care. If you want to get tired, like, that's your style. As a fan, if you want to be a fan favorite, do stuff like that. Like, Justin Gaethje doesn't fight the smartest way either, but guess what? He has a ton of fans, and he main events a bunch of shit.
Yeah, but he does backflips when he wins. That's the difference.
I'm just saying, like, you can say what you want about his cardio and his cardio management, but if that's his style and people like it, why would you stop doing it?
We'll see what happens. Now, we said we were going to talk about our main event of the evening, MMA on Point, with the tweet and the quote. Corey Anderson, back to the drawing board. I appreciate each and every fan and hater. A loss has never stopped me, and it ain't stopping me now. See y'all on the top. So the question for me, Jan Blahowicz is really going to center most of the conversation. Is he going to get a title shot? Is it going to be Jones Reyes 2? What are we going to get? I think it's going to be Jones Blahowicz. You want to run as far away from Dominic Reyes
I think
as you
they
can
do
right
Santos
now.
Reyes, and then they do Jan Jones. And honestly,
So Corey Anderson gets Anthony Smith then?
Well, no, because Anthony Smith's fighting Glover Teixeira.
Or the winner of that fight.
No, because he already beat Glover once, and Anthony Smith probably not. That's the problem. Corey Anderson, as a skill set, if we just don't even think of Corey Anderson, if we just took the things he does well and gave it to another person, we'd all be thinking, damn, Corey Anderson's really good. He's a good volume striker. He's kind of a bigger version of Colby Covington. When you really look at what he does well, he's a volume striker, he only moves forward, and he goes for takedowns. And he's really good at all those things. The problem is, Colby Covington can take an ungodly amount of punishment, and no one wants to talk about it. I know Usman put him down, but like Colby Covington's got a wicked chin on him. Corey Anderson, I don't want to call it glass, but it's been shattered a couple times, and it's a conversation I think we need to have. Corey Anderson should not be out there bobbing and weaving with some of the best strikers on planet Earth. Use your wrestling. It's your base. It's what you're so good at. Why would you even tempt the striking exchange with a guy like Jan Blachowicz? You dominated him in the first fight. It was 25-26, and then I think 130-27. You dominated him with your wrestling. You made him tired with your wrestling in the first fight. If all that stuff worked the first time, and Jan hasn't really shown... He's a really good grappler. He's not a great wrestler, though. So if you're Corey Anderson, the first thing I'm doing is running across the cage, shooting a double leg, and trying to get him down. And Daniel Cormier said this right as the fight was over, and I thought it was really interesting. When on Wednesdays when they had the fighter meetings and the commentators or journalists or whoever can go talk to the fighters, Daniel Cormier said Jan Blachowicz told him that after the 3-minute mark, Corey Anderson's going to be uncomfortable with the striking exchanges. He's going to go for the takedown. Corey Anderson ducked his head at exactly 3 minutes and 4 seconds. and Jan Blahowicz made him pay for it. So to just have that fight IQ going into it by Jan, that's really impressive. But yeah, Corey, what are we doing? Fight IQ has never been his strong suit, but over the last 4 fights, I really thought he fixed that. And this fight made me question it all over again.
It'll be interesting to see. I think, a Glover rematch would be great. I think Anthony Smith wins that fight. That's why it could
Anthony
set
Smith
that up.
puts him down. That's the problem. Any guy who has decent power and okay takedown defense is a nightmare for Corey Anderson.
We'll see what happens. We will see what happens. Now, our next one, Ray Borg, ineligible for the rankings. He's going to move to 135. The reason why I wanted to bring this up, and it was a tweet that surfaced and kind of went around on Saturday and on Friday. Yeah, he said he was going to retire if he missed weight again. And clearly he's not going to retire. You say that kind of thing in the heat of the moment. But at 135, I mean, what's the play here? Because this is a guy that... Like, let's say he fights somebody that's good and ranked at 135. Let's say he fights Rob Font.
Rob Font
is so much bigger. Like, he's so much bigger. So, it's a weird play. You're really good at 125, but it's tough to make the weight. At 135, you're going to have a really tough time. I mean, look at... Rob Font's a good one because look at Sergio Pettis at 135 in the UFC. Bellator is different. Bellator is different. But in the UFC... It didn't quite go that great.
And Sergio has a skill set that actually would translate up a weight class pretty well. Like, he's a fast striker with good power. Ray Borg's more of a grappler. And grappling works when you're the bigger guy or the same size. But when you're the smaller guy, not to say it can't work, but when you're a wrestler, you want to have that weight and that size advantage. He won't have that over any of the top guys at 135. So you can't book him at 125, but you know he can't really fulfill his whole potential at 135. So it is just a very strange limbo that Ray Borg's currently.
It's not like when Ryan Bader fought Matt Mitrione. You're not going to get that kind of a matchup when Ray Borg pops up. So interesting of note there. Now we really transition into something different. And Bruno Massimi, a good follow over on Twitter, really bringing it with the Asian MMA scene. And he copy and pasted off of Chatri's Facebook page. So we headed over there. It was too long to try and make this fit with the Twitter purge. So we just went off of this one. But very interesting that One Championships event that's going to be held on February 28th is going to be held behind closed doors. Fans not allowed in. Of course, there are coronavirus fears over in Asia right now. And it's a real shame. And especially the fact that you have a UFC champion from the city of Wuhan in Zhang Wei Li. It really sucks. The fact that she has a fight coming up and she's not going to be able to train at home, it sucks.
That's got to be on your mind too when you are fighting. Like when something that serious is going on in your hometown, it's really unfortunate. But it'll be interesting to see. And you know when there's fights in Japan, you can hear everything inside the cage. It's going to be that times 1,000 for One Championship.
One Championship has done stuff where it was kind of behind closed doors, or they've had it where media's there, or some people are there. But this is one of those events that, it sucks. They're gonna trudge forward. I know we were looking at the card, a couple of interesting names there, Mei Yamaguchi, and who else was there on there? There was somebody else.
But it's unfortunate. I do think they are making the right choice, though, for the athletes. I'm sure all the athletes want to compete. They spent money on their training camps and whatnot. So it's nice to see the events going on. So, but I think they made the right choice.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, safety's paramount above anything. We transition into a different conversation because I just brought up Ryan Bader and his fight with Matt Mitrione. He's going to be defending his light heavyweight title. Mind you, he hasn't fought for this title in closing in. It's been over 2 years. It's been a long time.
The co-main event's better than the main event, and honestly, they should switch them around. I think that since we're never going to get Lima versus Usman, or at least not in the foreseeable future, this is the next best thing. We've seen Lima fight pretty much every one of the top welterweights at this point in Bellator. So for him to go up and fight Gegard Mousasi, who, not to call him the welterweight killer because he only did it once, but the last time someone tried to do what Lima's doing, they got absolutely mollywopped by Gegard Mousasi. And I know Lima's quite a bit bigger than McDonald. He's going to transition up the weight a little bit better, I think. This is a phenomenal fight. And could you imagine if Bader wins and if Lima wins, that means 3 champions are going to hold pretty much every single belt in their organization.
The really interesting thing here is, if you're Diego, if you're Douglas Lima, don't go for an Imanari roll. No. If all else fails, do not roll towards Gegard Mousasi. You're going to lose. But the other thing is, stand up and trade with him. Because you saw in the fight that Mousasi had in his last one against Lyoto Machida. Ooh. I mean, Lyoto Machida put on a hell of a fight and lost by split decision. That fight, in the moment, I had Machida winning.
So did I. And Douglas Lima, I know Machida's bigger than Lima, but I'm pretty sure Lima, when he kicks people, it's like nothing most people have ever felt. And that's the one thing, Mousasi doesn't check leg kicks. We like talking about his wrestling, we like talking about his grappling, his jab's really good. He doesn't check leg kicks. And if you're fighting Douglas Lima, that's the first thing I'm going to look up. How good are you at checking leg kicks? And I just went back and I watched 6 Gegard Mousasi fights, and he only checked 3 of them in 6 fights. So if you're fighting Douglas Lima, hey Gegard, I'd fix that real quick. That's a phenomenal fight. And the main event's good too. Vadim Nemkov has not gotten the respect he deserves in Bellator. He's beat Phil Davis. He's had crazy good performance. The Liam McGarry fight where he stopped him with leg kicks was insane.
Yeah.
And Ryan Bader, I give Ryan Bader a pretty hard time because Ryan Bader is traditionally quite boring, but lately he's been doing pretty well. Ryan Bader hasn't fought a top-tier light heavyweight in a while that's not named Phil Davis. Him and Phil Davis could fight each other to a draw 100 times. Like, they're so evenly matched that really their skill sets are sort of exchangeable. Vadim Nemkov is sort of different, though. He's got the sambo background instead of the wrestling background. He's a way better striker. I don't want to say he's a better striker. He's a much more complete striker than Ryan Bader. Ryan Bader doesn't throw kicks. He's very boxing heavy with his fights. Vadim Nemkov throws wheel kicks. He throws leg kicks. He's kind of all over the place, so it's a really fun fight.
So, looking at Vadim Nemkov's record, first fight, finish, all first-round finishes. Then he fights Yuri Prohaska, who you're going to see in the UFC quite shortly, former Rising champ, and he lost. Then he lost a split decision to Carl Albrechtsen, who just fought Phil Davis and lost.
I would favor him tremendously in a rematch.
Then, first-round finish, comes into Bellator, beats Felipe Lins. Then he beats Liam McGarry. Then he beats Phil Davis in a split decision. Then he beats Rafael Carvalho, who was a long-time Bellator middleweight champ.
Beat the brakes off.
And beat him by rear naked choke in the second round. So this is going to be a really interesting fight. I would favor Ryan Bader in this.
I would too.
And of course, we're going to talk about this fight once we get closer. It's May 9th after all. But already a stacked main and co-main. Really. Great fights.
This is as good a Bellator product as they could put out, really.
Yeah, so really looking forward to that one. We transition now into a comment that was made by Eugene Behrman on Submission Radio, and now all of a sudden it's going to reload. So we'll see if it actually pops up. But the point of what was said was that if Israel Adesanya wanted to, he would push for a fight against Stipe Miocic, which you got to lay some context into there, and you got to really think about what he actually said. He could fight him. He wouldn't make the weight, but he would fight him, and he's willing to do it, which is more or less, to me, a play on saying, hey, I'm looking for the biggest fights that are out there, and if John Jones doesn't want this smoke,
we'll pass him up.
We'll pass on it.
Hey, I said this last time. I'm going to keep on saying this. This is going to be my hot take. We can make a sticky note just so Craig can hold me to it. If Israel Adesanya fights John Jones, I'm telling you right now, he beats him. And it's not even competitive, I don't think. Unless John can take him down. We just saw, if Dominic Reyes can outbox you for 3 out of 5 rounds and defend takedowns that John Jones was deep in. Let's be fair. It wasn't like John Jones just had a clinch on him. He was deep on his hips, had both hands wrapped around him, and he still couldn't take him down. If you can't take down Dominic Reyes and you can't outstrike him for the majority of a fight, Israel Adesanya's going to light you on fire on the feet. John Jones doesn't have enough... That's the one thing that worries me about the Israel Romero fight, is Yoel Romero kind of has that coin flip where all he has to do is land one punch. John Jones is a good striker, but he's not really a one-punch knockout kind of guy. So if you're going to try to stand there and have, technical kickboxing exchanges with Israel Adesanya, you're good. I don't know if he knocks him out, but he's definitely not beating him.
Hot take Tony in our last tweet. And this is really interesting because it was thrown out there by Front Page MMA Ross Houston, who is now a free agent, revealed he's in a bidding war with one championship, Bellator and PFL. All right, so let's look at UK fighters that have recently gone over to PFL, and they've really pushed them. Brendan Loughnane was not a part of the tournament, but they had him on the year-end finale, even though it wasn't really on TV. They did feature him quite heavily because of how well he made out on Contender Series, and the UFC elected not to sign him. I was surprised that the UFC's name wasn't in this. I was surprised that on the Copenhagen card, they didn't do a rematch between Houston and Nicholas Dalby based on how great their fight was over in Cage Warriors. Ross Houston is a great talent, and I'm just surprised that the UFC isn't in on this. And maybe they really are behind closed doors. But I'm surprised. Were you?
Without a doubt. I mean, Ross Houston, when Nicholas Dalby re-signed to the UFC after their fight, I thought it was just a matter of time before Ross Houston was also added to the roster. And like you said, with Copenhagen, you would assume that would be the perfect place to have their rematch. And you could even probably make that a co-main event. Like, that's not a Fight Pass prelim. That's not a prelim. That's one of the, at least, main card at the very minimum. So for the UFC to not really be considered, and like you said, behind closed doors, I'm sure they are, and I'm sure his team is in negotiation with every major MMA promotion. But Bellator, I think, is the best fit out of those three. One championship is so wishy-washy, and their future's not really...
Yeah, sign with them. If the iron's hot, take the money.
Oh, that's true. Oh, get paid 20. That's what I mean. He should go to whoever pays him more. To be completely honest, I don't care about. I know a lot of people like to say, "Oh, if you're not in the UFC, you're not fighting the best. Or if you're not in Bellator, you're not fighting the best." No, go to wherever pays you the most.
Lance Palmer is laughing at you.
Exactly. Lance Palmer puts on nothing but boring fights and makes $1 million every year. Does that sound like a pretty good way to live your life? Because I think there's worse. That's all. He probably will go to either the UFC or Bellator. I don't see him going to one championship. PFL could be interesting, but like you said, it doesn't feel like the best fit for him personally. Bellator could be fun, just due to the fact they go to Europe a lot. They have that European Contenders series type show that they could do. He can main event easily on there, so definitely a bright future for him, and it'll be interesting to see where he goes.
So maybe you get Ross Houston against, I don't know, Vitor Belfort at 185 and one championship. You get Ross Houston versus Rory McDonald in PFL, and you get Ross Houston against, anybody at 170. Anybody.
Mike Perry.
Make it fun. Really. But that is the Twitter Purge. I mean, we covered a lot today, but the main focus of the show, of course, we have a big card coming up this weekend. We're going to focus our 2-minute predictions. We're going to do main card and prelims like we always do with UFC Auckland, but it is a good card, Matt. I mean, there's a lot of fun fights on here. What are some of the ones that are really standing out to you?
So the one that we had talked about before the camera started rolling is Jake Matthews versus Emil Mack. Emil Mack he hasn't fought since he fought the now champion Kamaru Usman. Or wait, no, he had one fight after that. Anyways, Emil Mack kind of burst onto the scene when he fought Jordan Mein at UFC 206.
Time out. He burst onto the scene when he beat
Rusmar
Palhares.
When he beat Rusmar Palhares. But his first fight in the UFC, he beat Jordan Mein, who was a guy who a lot of people knew about. He wasn't in the best stage of his career, but it was still a really big win on a huge card too, because they were the first fight on the main card. And for him to go out there, he put on a really good performance. He got injured mid-fight, but he fought through it. It was just really good performance. And then he had visa issues, and it just sort of delayed his next fight. And then, of course, his next one...
A lot of injury issues, too.
Exactly. And then he fought Usman, and Usman gonna Usman. But Emil Mack has this one massive weakness that Kamaru Usman does it to everybody, but anyone can do it to Emil Mack. He doesn't wrestle. I don't know where he does his wrestling training. I don't know where he gets his takedown defense in, but it's not even like, oh, Matt, you're being harsh, like you're comparing him to the top guys in the world. No. Emil Mack gets taken down by a strong gust of wind. And Jake Matthews, he doesn't have a great chin, let's be honest, but what he does really well, he's really good at taking people down, choking them out. So I feel like it's very cliche, but it's a clash of styles. Either Emil Mack's going to knock him out on the feet, or Jake Matthews can take him down, choke him out. What's yours?
Another fun one on there, Kai Kara-France taking on Tyson Nam. I mean, you saw it in Nam's UFC debut. Yeah, it didn't go his way against Sergio Pettis, but rarely things will. And in a fight against Kai Kara-France, they match up very well together. It's kind of a similar story. And yeah, I mean, I would, without looking at everything and diving totally deep into it, expect Kai Kara-France to get a win close to home. But it should be a great fight.
Are you concerned that Kai Kara-France come back pretty quick after the Moreno fight? That didn't happen that long ago, and he did take quite a bit of damage. Does that worry you at all going into this fight, or do you think that Tyson Nam's not the biggest threat to kind of take advantage of the damage?
Yeah, I mean, it's more of that. It would worry me a little bit, and I mean, I'm looking at some of these fights. Let's go main card. There's some head scratchers as to why they're on a main card of a UFC card, but lately, there's a lot of those. I mean, Exhibit A, Juan Adams taking on a really tough out. At home in Houston on a pay-per-view. That was weird against Justin Tafa. Karolina Kowalkiewicz has not looked great lately. She's taken on
downright bad
Xiaonan Yan. That's one where I think Yan gets the win, but it's weird that this is on a main card of a fight night. Ben Sassoli and Marcus Rogerio de Lima. That's a weird one to be on a main card. And then your co-main event is Michael Oleszejczuk taking on Jimmy Crute, which I get it, Jimmy Crute's close to home, whatever. Michael Oleszejczuk lost his last fight quite handily against Ovince St. Preux. So there's some weird fights on here. Like I said, we're going to dive into it a little bit deeper. You also have two...
The main event's phenomenal, though. We kind of ripped on the card. The main event's the best fight of the weekend, other than Fury Wilder 2. I had to drop that in there. Just because I think this main event isn't only fight of the night, it's your fight of the weekend. This could be fight of the year. I really put that much emphasis on this fight. Paul Felder can take ungodly amounts of damage, and so can Dan Hooker, to the point where it's almost detrimental for their future careers. And both these guys, don't know if you noticed, they put a hurting on people. So it's perfect matchmaking. It's a really cool setting, too, that they're doing it in Auckland. So I couldn't be more excited for the main event.
And also really looking forward to it. You've got 2 Bellator cards this weekend. Bellator 239, Bellator Dublin. 20 fights on Friday, 21 on Saturday, which is insane.
That's wild.
But they're stacked cards, and I mean, we'll go through them with our predictions, but just focusing on the main event and a couple of the fights on 239, you have Denise Kielholtz, Christina Williams, you have Javi Ayala, Valentin Moldavsky, you have Tim Johnson, Tyrell Fortune, Miles Jury, Brandon Gertz as the co-main event for 239, and then you have Yaroslav Amasov and Ed Ruth. That's a great fight. Amasov undefeated, Ed Ruth the one loss to Naaman Gracie. He's won his last couple, if I'm not mistaken, and he's looked great in the Bellator cage. Whereas if you look over at Dublin, I mean, yeah, the main event, it was kind of thrown together because you had fights moving in and out, and you lost one of the major fights in Gallagher. I put their last names together. Cal Elnor and James Gallagher. So you have Leah McCourt taking on Judith Ruiz. But you have Brent Primus, Chris Bungard, which could be a great fight.
It should be the main event.
Aaron Chalmers is taking on Austin Clem. A lot of people still excited for Aaron Chalmers. And Kiefer Crosby taking Yamik Furtado. There's a lot of good ones there, too. Okay. I mean, Paul Redmond, Georgie Karhanyan, you could have thrown that in as main event as well. A lot of Irish fans just love. I mean, Paul Redmond has fought in every single organization, and he's looked good. And it's a good card.
Karhanyan's kind of one of those, like, Bellator stablemates where you always think of him. He's kind of synonymous with the brand at this point, and he's fought all the top guys in the division in Bellator, so it's always nice to see that fight.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see how that works out, but there's a lot of MMA. You're not going to want to miss our predictions. We're going to have them for UFC Auckland and the 2 Bellator cards. We'll separate them. We'll throw some of the fights that we're looking forward to with those, and if there's any of the Bellator fights that you want us to cover, make sure you hit us up in comments somewhere, and we'll find them. But as always, you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at Craig Allen FMP, at Matt Allen FMP. I've got the shirt on now. I don't have any of these left on the store, but we brought the store back. You can find that at FightNightPicks.net. There's articles over there now. We brought back the writing portion of it. We're posting more of our YouTube stuff over there as well, but you can find the shirts. There's the Miami Vice t-shirts, hats. They're 5 panels. I mean, listen, people like 5 panels. I like 5 panels. It's a nice hat to throw on when you can. But there's all kinds of stuff over there. So, yeah, really looking forward to a great weekend of MMA. Matt, your fight of the weekend is Felder Hooker.
Oh, without a doubt.
Mine is probably also Felder Hooker. But there's a lot of stuff to look forward to, so make sure you check that out. We're always active on Twitter and Instagram. We're going to have a ton of prediction videos coming out this week, so you're not going to want to miss those. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. And this week in MMA, it happens when it does, and we enjoy doing it, so hopefully you do as well. Thanks for tuning in, and we will be back again as soon as possible. Matt, without further ado, as we always say, let's get into it.